All right, so people wanted an update on a couple players. The first one was CMC. He had a limited practice yesterday, but he returned practice without any kind of limitations today. We talked about before about how Achilles tendonitis recovers back really well once they're back. I'm not really too concerned about an aggravation for him, so he should be a full-fledged starter the rest of the way. Let's hit a couple hamstring injuries. So we got Brian Robinson, who surprisingly seems like he's going to play tonight. I would say that he's a start. You can throw in your comments whether you have some questions about someone that you'd rather start over him, but he logged a couple full practices despite him having a slight setback on Friday. So he's an RB1 when he's out there, and there aren't many players that would go over him. Kittle also has been injured often throughout this season, but played through a lot of injuries, except for week 3 when he did have a hamstring injury and ended up missing. But in this regard, I'm not too worried about it, even though they called it hamstring irritation. He already returned back to practice. So even if you have a backup player that's going on Thursday, I wouldn't worry about it. Kittle's going to play this coming Sunday, so just hold out for him. He's been the overall tight end 1 this entire season. I think he's good. Is this the week that we finally see T. Higgins coming back? So he had this hamstring injury earlier in the season. Then he had a quad injury. He's missed the past 2 weeks. There's a bunch of talk about him being traded this offseason. So with him having a significant injury history, he really should be wanting to prove that, he's not injury prone and that he's going to be a functional piece of whatever team is a part of next season. So I do think that he plays this upcoming week, and I think he has a blow-up game. But I also think that with 2 soft tissue injuries, he's a high risk for an aggravation at some point during this fantasy football playoffs. So if T. Higgins plays this weekend, which I expect him to, and he goes off, I would trade him before that trade deadline. Here we go, the hamstring still going. Nico Collins. So video footage of him came out today. He was moving quick. He was catching passes. He was juking. I don't see any reason why he won't be playing this upcoming weekend. I was surprised he didn't play last weekend without really an injury designation or with them activating him right before that Lions game. But regardless, I think that he is fully recovered from that hamstring, and I think he's going to go off this coming weekend. We honestly don't know what's going on with Amari Cooper. He's been practicing the past couple of weeks, logging multiple practices throughout the week, and then getting ruled out right before the game. It seems like he's got one of those distal radial ulnar joint injuries. We talked about that with Tyreek as well, and we talked about how they can be pretty painful, and sometimes you just aren't able to play through them with the pain. But most recently, practice footage showed Amari doing significantly more in these practices than he has in previous weeks, and it's not early in the week, but it's not Friday. And he was catching passes. He showed a little bit more movement in that hand-wrist motion, so I would be surprised if Amari isn't playing this upcoming week. I do think it's another one of those distal radial ulnar joint sprains, though. Najee Harris had some kind of foot injury. We don't know specifically what it was, but they didn't call it turf toe, they didn't call it a midfoot sprain, and they didn't call it a fracture, so obviously those are all good things. He returned back to practice today, and although he hasn't been quite as efficient last week, he's been honestly a back-end RB1 the previous 3 to 4 weeks before that. So you can put in the comments if you have any questions about who you might be thinking about starting over him or in place of him. I'm currently have him slotted in my lineup this coming week, so we'll see how that plays out. Some people asked about defensive players. Marshon Lattimore got traded over to the Washington Commanders, and he's been out with a hamstring injury these past couple of weeks. So they usually take about 3 to 5 weeks to recover from. He's kind of right in the meat of that, so I would expect him to probably be out for about another week, maybe 2 weeks, but he should be good to go after that. Definitely should be a force in the playoffs. I don't expect to see LaPorta out there this weekend. He had an AC joint sprain. They called it a pretty severe grade 1. I think he definitely misses this upcoming week, and then he's about a 50% chance for missing the following week, but after that he should be back. We got clarification that Trevor Lawrence's non-throwing shoulder injury was also an AC joint sprain. This is something they contemplated surgery on, which is pretty uncommon. It means that the clavicle is pretty significantly shifted out of place. I wouldn't expect to see him back this season.